Hello and welcome. You're watching News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and in the studio with me is my colleague Ashok Bagria, as we're going to focus over the next few minutes over an important legal and political issue. Now, is the government of India willing to repeal the controversial sedition law? Today, Attorney General R. Venkatramani informed the Supreme Court that the centre has initiated the process of re-examining Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code, which criminalizes sedition. The centre says consultations on a review of the sedition law are at the final stages. The law on sedition states that a person will be charged with sedition if they bring or attempt to bring into hatred or contempt or excite or attempt to excite disaffection towards the government established by law in India through words, signs or by visible representation. Now, this law has deep colonial roots. It was incorporated in the Indian Penal Code all the way back in 1870 and is structured around the English Treason Felony Act of 1848 to deal with dissenters, mutinous activities and rebellions. Before independence, the sedition law was used by the British to suppress voices of criticism and dissent in Indian society, and several freedom fighters such as Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Subhash Chandra Bose and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad were tried under this provision. While India gained independence from British Raj in 1947, we couldn't gain independence from this relic of the colonial era. Over the years and decades, successive governments under various political parties have misused the sedition law to crush criticism and dissent. They've gone after opposition leaders, activists, journalists, dissenters and government critics by slapping this law on them. Sample this. Since 2010, over 800 sedition cases have been filed in India against 13,000 people. Significantly, the conviction rate in sedition cases is very low, something that has led to the oft-repeated argument that most of these cases are politically motivated with little or no evidence to back the charges. The question simply is, isn't it time the world's largest democracy consigned to the dustbin of history a colonial-era law that's largely misused for political agendas and to crush dissent? Let's go across to my colleague Ashok Bagria for more on this. Ashok, the Attorney General informs the Supreme Court of India that consultations are on and at advanced stages. The government is re-examining this law. The question really is the government of India serious about repealing this law at any stage? Because so far, regardless of who's been in power, they have never shown any intent of doing away with this law.
Neha, whether the government of India would repeal the sedition law or do something about it, my guess is as good as yours. Now, this is something which was voiced in the Supreme Court today, where the advocates for the petitioners also told the Supreme Court that they don't have hope that the government of India is going to do anything about the sedition law, because they cited that as far as the Digital Act or Personal Data Protection Act is concerned, it's been in work for the last 5 years and nothing has happened. So it looks to them that a similar fate might meet the sedition law. However, all said and done, the statement today was made by the highest law officer of the country, that is the Attorney General for India, Mr. R. Venkatramani, who informed the court that the government of India has been looking at the sedition law for the last 12 months. The consultation process with the experts was in the advanced stages. And another important thing he said was that there is a likelihood that the government of India would move a bill in the monsoon session of Parliament where they would either read down or introduce certain safeguards in the sedition law. Here, primarily what we are dealing with is that there are allegations, there are spate of litigation or petitions in the Supreme Court where the allegation is that this law has been abused, misused and grossly overused to target not just free speech but target students, academics, journalists and politicians. So this is the sum all of the fate of the sedition law, that over the years, and especially more glaringly so in the last 10 years, the law has been slapped or used to file FIR against people, those who have dissented with the governments in power.
And that is the ugly truth. It is usually critics and dissenters who are targeted with the sedition law. And as we said, this has been happening under successive governments. We cannot, point our fingers at just one dispensation and say that they are the ones who've done it. It's been happening for ages now. But before we get into the history and the politics of it, Ashok, I want to ask you this. The government says consultations with experts and stakeholders are on. What does that mean? What is the ambit of these consultations? Are we talking about opposition leaders and civil society bodies also being part of these consultations?
Well, we are not clear about what the consultation process is or who the Government of India is consulting, because none of this was disclosed in the court today. But the government says that they are in a process of consultation with experts. Now, who these experts are, I don't know. This is strictly being kept confidential because no comments have been invited by the Government of India from the members of the civil society or the common citizens. Generally, which is the case we see whenever a new law is floated or a new law is to be legislated, a consultation, a wide consultation process takes place where a draft of the bill is released. Comments are invited from the members of the society, asking for their comments, whether they agree, if something else needs to be done, what needs to be tinkered, what riders need to be placed, so on and so forth. But as far as sedition is concerned, clearly we don't know what it is, but the government is very clear in its head. The government believes, because a year back a similar statement was made in the Supreme Court, where the government said that yes, we believe that this law is being abused. There has something to be done about it in terms of either reading it down, reading section 124A down, or introducing some safeguards. And at that point of time, the Attorney General for India, Mr. K.K. Venugopal, said that it would be wise that this law is not struck down, but instead some riders are placed within the law to make sure that this law is not being misused.
So let me ask you this final question. You're saying all indications point in the direction that the law is highly unlikely to be repealed. It could be read down and there could be safeguards built in. Now, when this amended bill is brought in Parliament, how do you think the opposition is likely to react? Is it likely to become another flashpoint between the government and the opposition? One fact is very interesting, Ashok, and you might agree with me on this, that every time a political party is in the opposition, they go hammer and tongs criticizing the government of the day over misuse of sedition and saying it must be done away with. However, when the same party comes to power, they refuse to let go of this law.
You're right here. And in fact, let me point out at least two incidents that will bring out the situation or highlight how this particular law has been misused. You see, in 2011, the Tamil Nadu government slapped sedition charges against 9,000 people in one go. Why? Because they were protesting against the Kudankulam nuclear power project. Now, the villagers in that village did not want this nuclear power project to come up because they feared that a mishap could happen and there could be a nuclear fallout due to it. Similarly, again in 2016, there was this Pathalgadi movement which was going on in the state of Jharkhand. 7,000 people again slapped for sedition charges in single go. And in both these states at that point in time had non-BJP governments. Okay. As far as Jharkhand is concerned, at that point in time, there was the BJP government and Hemant Soren rode on the promise, on the electoral promise that at the moment he comes back, he'll revoke the sedition cases. But he's been in power for the last 3-4 years and nothing has happened.
They obviously forget about those promises. I think one thing we can safely say is whether it is Congress-led UPA governments that we've had at the centre or BJP-led NDA governments, all political parties and governments are equally guilty of misusing this law. Therefore, really, we need, there's always been this debate about whether the judiciary needs to take a view on this, but at the moment, clearly the ball is in the court of the government. This bill will be introduced in Parliament. We'll wait and see how this pans out. Ashok Bagria, thank you so much for sharing your views and perspective with us on this developing story. Time for us to take a quick break.